You ever use ChatGPT and just sit back stunned? I mean, it can answer pretty much anything, write a whole essay, even spit out code in seconds. It feels like straight up magic. So today, let's pull back the curtain and see how the trick actually works. And that's the big question, right? When you get a response that's so creative and, well, human sounding, you can't help but wonder if there's a real mind in there. But as we're about to find out, what's happening behind the scenes is something totally different. And honestly, it's just as mind-blowing. Okay, let's start at the beginning. What is this thing really? The number one thing you gotta get is that ChatGPT is way more of a superpowered predictor than it is a thinker. At its heart, ChatGPT is what we call a large language model, or an LMM. And its whole job, its entire purpose, boils down to something surprisingly simple. Its only goal is to predict the most likely next word in a sentence. Seriously, that's it. It's an incredibly sophisticated pattern matching machine. So if it's just predicting the next word, how in the world does it get so good? Well, it all comes down to its training. Imagine the most intense, massive study session in the history of, well, history. The AI is fed an absolutely insane amount of text. We're talking billions and billions of words from a huge chunk of the internet, from countless books, from articles, you name it. And by churning through all of that, it's not just memorizing stuff. It's learning the invisible rules of language, grammar, sentence structure, and all the subtle ways words and ideas connect to each other. And the way it learns is actually pretty straightforward. So during its training, it sees a sentence like, the Earth revolves around the, maybe millions of times. Just by pure statistics, it figures out that the word most likely to pop into that blank is sun. Now, just imagine that same process scaled up to cover almost every topic you can think of. That's how it builds its incredible knowledge base. Okay, so it's learning from all this data, but where does the learning actually happen? For that, we need to peek inside the AI's brain, which is built on something called a neural network. So a neural network is this amazing system that's kind of inspired by our own brains. It's got all these layers of interconnected digital neurons that pass information to each other. When you type in a prompt, your words go into this network, and it gets to work analyzing the patterns, calculating all the probabilities, and figuring out the most fitting response. It's this deep, layered structure that lets it handle the crazy complexity of human language. But here's the secret sauce. There's a special kind of design that makes models like ChatGPT so powerful. It's called a transformer, and its secret weapon is a brilliant mechanism called attention. This is the thing that lets the AI actually understand context. All right, check this out. Here's a classic puzzle for an AI. The trophy didn't fit in the suitcase because it was too small. Now, for you and me, it's obvious what it is. But for a computer, that's a real head-scratcher. Is it the trophy, or is it the suitcase? Right? So how on earth does it figure that out if it can't actually understand the world? Well, the answer is that secret weapon we just talked about. This is where the magic happens. The attention mechanism works like a spotlight. As the AI reads the sentence, it learns to pay more attention to the words that matter most for context, giving them more weight. So in our sentence, it shines a spotlight on the relationship between suitcase and small, figuring out that for something not to fit, it's the container that's too small. It correctly links it to the suitcase, not because it knows what a suitcase is, but because the pattern tells it so. Okay, so we've got the training, we've got the attention trick. How does that all come together to turn your question into a full-blown answer? Well, you can think of it like a digital assembly line. So first, your prompt gets chopped up into little pieces called tokens. These tokens then get fed into that big neural network. The AI analyzes everything and then makes its one simple prediction. What is the single most likely next token? It generates that word, adds it to the sentence, and then, and this is key, it runs that new, slightly longer sentence back through the whole system again to predict the next word. It just keeps doing that, over and over, building the response one word at a time. Now, if all that talk about tokens and networks feels a little abstract, don't worry. There's a perfect analogy that ties this all together, and it also helps us understand why ChatGPT isn't always right. Okay, so picture a librarian, but not just any librarian. This is a super librarian who has literally read and absorbed every single book in a library of millions of volumes. Their knowledge is vast, they've seen it all. Now, here is the most crucial part to remember. When you ask this librarian a question, they don't walk over to a shelf, pull out a book, and find the answer. Instead, they create an answer from scratch, purely based on all the patterns, connections, and sentence structures they remember from everything they've ever read. They're reassembling knowledge, not retrieving it. And that amazing analogy shows us exactly where the cracks are. This librarian doesn't actually understand any of the books they've read. They're just an expert at mimicking patterns. Because of this, they can sometimes get details mixed up or even confidently make stuff up entirely. That's what we call hallucinations. And that's why it is absolutely critical to double-check any important facts you get from an AI. All right, so let's boil it all down one last time. How does it work? It learns patterns from a gigantic sea of text. It uses a brain-like neural network to process everything. It figures out context using that clever attention trick, and then it builds an answer for you by just predicting one word at a time. So it's not actually magic, but it is an incredible piece of engineering. And all of this leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. If it's all just math and probability, just a super sophisticated prediction machine, then where does that spark of creativity we sometimes see, where does that actually come from?